good. And we just don't look after the people who get knocked by these things. We don't take any special care about them, trying to get them back on their feet. You know? I mean, you only have to walk down to the eastern suburbs of Christchurch to see that. You know? I mean, we're not actually a caring society when it comes to people getting knocked back. And that's probably true to not just the physical things like earthquakes and floods. But, you know, we're going to require a lot of responses to what's been thrown at us. And the best way of doing that is a coordinated, cooperative, you know, socially just way of doing it. And that's what it gets for everybody. But it seems that we just don't get a head around it. It seems, I don't know whether it's just too individualistic or whatever it is. Not. I think we really up our game in terms of cooperation and collaboration with each other. And we're going to get a lot of things thrown at us if we don't pick our game up. We're all going to be in trouble. And so I do think that there's going to be huge transformations in our lives, whether we ask for them or they don't, whether we adapt them or we just get thrown at us. And it seems to me that the only really good security has nothing to do with stuff and it's nothing to do with owning anything and that. It's good relations with your neighbours, it's known, you can rely on your friends. That's what really counts when the push comes to a shove. Doesn't matter how much money you've got in some bank account in Switzerland. You know? Doesn't do any good for you. So I think we just need to, you know, build our neighbourhood relationships and look after each other when something happens and look better than we do. I don't think we can much justice in New Zealand.
Excellent. So now we're going to take any questions that we have before we take a 5-minute break.
Yeah, I'd just like to hear what people would say about the Hutt Valley. I understand that it was one of the most productive valleys and it's been paved over and we're still planning new roads, the Katami to Grenada and then the Cross Valley link. And we're putting all these big stores and basically they're not permeable layers, you know, they actually make the floods worse and we will have a really big flood at some stage. So people are living in a floodplain. We're building flood gates which cost a huge amount of money, diverting from doing other things. I wonder what would people suggest that we, how could we alter that trajectory? Remove some of the roads, some of the paving, and get people to shift a little bit up onto the sides of the hill. Is there much support for that?
No. But what there is support for is bikes. So we're on a really big mission in Lower Hutt for bikes. I think if we got rid of most of the cars in Lower Hutt, we'd go a long way. I think Lower Hutt has so much potential to be an incredibly food sovereign region. We have enormous amounts of land still. We've got large tracts of Housing New Zealand and ex-Housing New Zealand that are still on big quarter-acre sections of the most fertile land. We stick anything in the ground out there and grow. We haven't been grazed with dairy, so that in itself is a really big bonus. We also have quite close-knit communities, and we do have a council that, we do have a council that has got a much greater focus around food now than what it ever has before. So the ease with which you can make things happen out there, I think, has really shifted. So I think all the elements are there for lots of bikes, less cars, more community projects and programs that enable really short supplies. So maybe moving away from this idea of community gardens and into neighbourhood gardens. So we just have a bunch of families that are growing their own food solution within a very short walking distance in their own backyards. All of that is quite achievable in Lower Hutt. Yeah.
All right, we've got time for this. We'll take 3 more questions. So then do that.
Okay, I wanted to ask you about related to food security. So there are some studies that have shown how much we produce of each aliments, and for example, they show that the nuts and fruits are the least produced ones, so the ones that would be needed at some stage, while we are producing more than 500% of the meat we need and double the amount of vegetables. So do you have any thoughts about How can we, like, do you think that agroforestry will be, for example, the way to go, or?
I'll have to make an answer to that. I mean, yeah, because I'm involved in the project, we were trying to sort of demonstrate how we can do forest-based agriculture in New Zealand. We've got our present climate, at least, is very good for trees and very good for tree crops, and it can be hugely more productive to have a multi-layered tree crop-based system. I don't always like to use the word food forest because it's actually the margin of the forest that you're mimicking, actually. It's that bit of productive margin which goes right from the veggies through to your currants and berries and right up to your nut trees and that. So those sort of systems, I think are the future way that agriculture should really go. I just encourage anybody to try out a bit of a food forest in their backyard or whatever. Diverse, multi-layered. Just try it out because we've got to relearn how to do it. I think our ancestors did have some knowledge about how to do it, and certainly the most productive home gardens, if you look at different societies around, it's been that sort of mixture of a whole range of trees and shrubs and veggies and small animals. It might be like chicken type animals, or it might be related to your environment. And so I actually think that's really the way we should go. A lot of New Zealand should not be in grasslands. Certainly our hills should not be grasslands. So we have another huge disconnect there. And I agree that we have a complete imbalance in what we produce in terms of nutritional quality.
Second last question.
Yeah, Doug is something that maybe been saying to avoid the worst effects of climate change, that we have to reduce the amount of energy quite considerably, particularly the amount of water used and the land mass. Like, I think at the moment a third of the planet's land surface is used for agriculture, and it's only going to increase as populations increase. So I was just wondering your comments on that. Because it's quite a difficult one because it'll be quite an unpopular thing for but from what I can see, that's where we have to be.
Well, I think I've already said that we just can't have them in there. We can't have this population and have animals in there. It just doesn't work. The sums don't add up. So that's the reality, whether people like it or not. I suspect that, like Gary was saying, it'll be, the inequality will mean that certain people will carry on living exactly how they've been living before, and there'll be people on the margins who, but it's not like it's a negative thing not having animals in your diet anyway, so it's hardly, going to be a worry. It's for a lot of people, it's just what they're used to, I think, and they can't break away from something because they've grown up with it. So, but the reality is that to have the population that we have, if you look at a graph of the increase in human population, you'll see an equal decrease in the number of species. They just mirror each other exactly, because there's just one planet, and one species that's gone into overdrive like we have is squeezing out so many others.
If you look at sort of traditional foods, like if you look at traditional cuisines, they come from place, and they are the different meals are representative of that place, and they actually representative of the food that comes from that place. So if we are to look at what grows in our environment and then start to create food that responds to our environment sustainably, it would actually change the whole way that we looked at food. What we've kind of done from the kind of abundance that all the soil created for us was gone, well, we can have meat-free veg, but that's not actually what a sustainable meal might look like in our environment. And that's a massive thing. Like, there are people who try to produce local food and then, like I'm just thinking of somewhere like, say, the Wairarapa Eco Farm, and so they grow a whole lot of vegetables seasonally based out in the Wairarapa, and one of the major issues of why they can't sell their food is that people go, well, what do I do with kohlrabi and daikon in winter? It's like, well, that's actually realistically what grows really easily in our environment at this period of time. And it's fun to look at what is the food that grows here, and how can we create cuisine that responds to that, rather than kind of going, what we eat is meat-free veg, and thus how do we provide for that?
So we need cooking and gardening taught at schools.
Can I just put a little thing in there? It's just a little theory that one of the reasons that people are so disconnected is not just they live in urban areas, which is not very, which is rather disconnecting, but it's because they eat globally. I mean, Sarah was making the point earlier that, you know, we are what we eat. We're actually a creature of the food we eat. That's our main relationship with our environment. We get the most information, energy information, through the food we eat. You know? And we should be a people of that place. You know, so people of the place where they are. And how can you feel any sort of grounding or any sort of spiritual connection with anywhere if you're eating globally? I mean, it's just like you get all these different influences thrown at you all over the place and bombarding things. It's like, I mean, that's why there's a sort of spiritual disconnect of people.
Just one more question to make it really brief, because we're sort of running on a bit of time and we're going to go to break.
Cool. Yeah, I've just been reading about farmers markets in the States and how that's kind of synonymous with the local food movement. And I was just thinking about in Wellington, for example, it seems like the markets aren't actually local food. And I was wondering if you knew why that was and why that sort of market thing has become disconnected from being local.
There is a farmers market. It's in Milne. I think that its location makes it difficult. I also think there's been a lot of reasons why our local food production is kind of getting food from large areas. So I think it's slower to develop the local farms markets here. And so they've struggled. I also think just things like the location of it has made it harder for them to get visibility regularly. But it is that a lot of the local food supply in our local food chain has been really reduced over the years.
What you're asking for is a behavioural change. A behavioural change is when you are busy, when you have a pattern and a modus operandi of being with your family, and your time for going and gathering food for the family meals is really limited. You just keep doing what you know because it's there and it's easy. We have made global food incredibly easy, but the local food seems to be a lot harder to access. It's all around the wrong way.
Also financially, local food costs more. It's actually value in it. So it costs more when people put time and energy into it. And so processed food is generally cheaper. And so that's where people often go.
And that's that requires another behavioural change of quality over quantity. And I think we've gone a bit nuts on the quantity thing.
Cool. So we can take a 5-minute break. We're starting to run on a bit of time, but yes, everyone will be back in 5 minutes. Alright everybody, we're about to start again. As I said before, when everyone's coming back to their seats, if people have been standing the whole time and you've been sitting, have seats swap over, no pressure. And a lot of people have difficulty hearing. If you need to come to the front, just let us know. And if you guys don't mind. Alright, so you might have noticed the first half was about the problems with our current food system. The second half is going to focus on what a sustainable and just food system looks like and how we can get there. So now everyone's taking their seats. The first question will be, what are the community-based food projects that you know of or are involved with? And we'll start with Sarah.
So I help the urban agriculture portfolio at the Wellington City Council. So I work with all of the community gardens. Well, I work with several of the community garden groups across the city. There are 30 community gardens in the city, and they several of them. So about 15 of those are in housing, so council housing flats, and they have a community garden program that runs for them. And then we have about 10 which are on council land, and then there are about 5 that run through different churches. And those groups, which kind of one, we get together every 6 weeks and we with the coordinators them, and we work out what's working, what's not working, how to help out with them. And they kind of